Let us continue building our Auto Block Extractor or Auto Object Extractor project. But before we start coding, let us first analyze this form here, the user interface. Let's identify what are the triggers that we need to code. So the first one is, since we have a default value here for the path of the drawing, the first event that will be happening is the form load, which means that when this form loads, we will display right away all the drawings from this default location. So that is one. The second event or trigger is the browse drawing event. So when the user clicks on this button, we will provide the dialog box to search or locate the folder where the drawings are located or are stored. And then of course we are going to display it here also. That's the second one. The third one is when the user select this checkbox. So when this checkbox is selected, it will check all of the drawings from this checked list box also. So that's the third one. And the fourth one is when the user clicks on this process block extraction button, and of course the cancel button here. So those are the events that we are going to handle in our code. So let's get started. So if I double click on the form, it will create for us a form load event. So let's do that. Just double click on, but let me just show you first before we start that. Let's view the code by right clicking on this block form here. So we have an empty code, only the scaffolding or the class declaration. So let's go back to our designer. So let us start with the form load event. So just double click on the form, and Visual Studio provide us a method or the event trigger. So now we are going to do something in here. So basically, when the form loads, we are going to display all the drawing files. So we will create one method, or it's just a sub method to load the drawings into the checkbox, check list box control. Now let us create a method called load drawings, and we will pass the path of the drawing. So txt path dot text dot trim. So basically we are passing the value in our text box. So currently there is no load drawings method created yet, so just hover over into this method here and generate block extractor form load drawings method. So Visual Studio will create that for us. Okay, so before we start coding in that method, let me just import all the necessary libraries that we will be needing. So the first one is system.drawing, imports system.io, input output, imports system.windows.forms. Okay, so these are the three libraries that we will be needing in our code. Okay, so for these load drawings, let's call this as by val dwg path as string. That is our argument. So that will be coming from this form load event. The reason, by the way, why we create a separate method for this, so that we can reuse this method. When we click on the btn browse folder button, we will also be needing this method. All we have to do is pass the location of the drawing, and we can reuse this method. So what we need here is a folder browser dialog control. So let's do that using folder browser dialog. This is just my variable, and we will instantiate that folder browser dialog control. Okay, next we have to do the fbd that selected path. So we are basically passing this drawing path here, dwg path. And now we're going to create a variable that will store all the drawings from this path. So we have located the path. Now we need to create a variable. Let's just call it files as string, an array of string, equals directory that get files. That would be fbd that selected path, and the pattern will be *.dwg. So we are filtering it with that pattern. Now if files.length, which means that there are drawing files, is greater than 0, if we found some, then we will loop through this files collection and then append or add into our check list box drawing control. So for each dwg as string, is just a variable. You can use any variable name there. So for each dwg as a string in files, all we have to do is add into our chk lstdwgs control that items that add, and then the dwg, and that's it. So after that, we'll just provide the user with a message saying that we have a total number of drawings basically found in that folder. So chklstdwgs that items that count. Okay, so we are done with our first method and the first event or the trigger. Next, let's go back to our designer. Now let's handle the code for the btn browse folder. So double click on this button control, and now we have here the browser click event. So using the same control, we will be also utilizing that folder browser dialog equals new folder browser dialog, and we also specify the selected path equals txt path dot text, but this time we are going to create a new variable that will basically an instantiation of the dialog result. Excuse me. So dim result as dialog result equals folder browser dialog that show dialog. This is the the dialog that will be displayed for the user to select or locate the folder. So if result equals dialog result dot OK, and also not string dot is null or white space, our FBD selected path, then so we are just making sure here that there is a value returned from the dialog result where the user selected the folder. And now we are going to do the same thing for the load drawings here. So dim files as string, but this time we're going to get it from the directory that get files, and the fbd that selected path, yeah, same thing, and the pattern will be *.dwg. Okay, so before we start loading into the checkbox control, something like this here, we'll have to make sure that we clear first the chk lstdwg's control, otherwise it will append on top of it, so there will be lots of drawings that are not actually reflective of the number of drawings in the folder selected. So now all we have to do is copy this code block here and load it, and that's it. Now we have to just copy this also for the message, and then we will set the path, the new location where the user selected, and that's it. So now we have the updated txt path based on the selected folder by the user. And that's it for our browse folder event, click event. Next, we are going to handle the select all checkbox, which means that if this is selected, if this is checked, all of the drawings from here will be checked also. So double click on this control. Now we have the chk select all check change event. So all we have to do is validate if the selected all that checked. If it is checked, then we are going to loop through the chk lstdwg and check them all. So we will be using the for I loop, the for loop. For I as integer equals 0 to the number of counts for the chk lstdwgs, that items that count, -1 because we start from 0. Then we will just check them all. That set item check, and the index will be the I. The indexer will be the I, and then value as boolean, we'll just set it to false. Okay. Next, we have here we are going to enable now the btn extract blocks. I mean, set it to false. Basically, the purpose of this is just to prevent the user from selecting it without having added the block name first. So there's no point to enable it right away and then there's no block name, so it's just a waste of time. And now we're just going to message the user, provide some message, and update equals number of selected drawings equals, and concatenate the chk lstdwgs that the check. Now this time we're going to need the checked items count. This is very helpful when we are dealing with lots of drawing files. And so this is for the checked items. However, we also have to handle the situation where it's also unchecked. By the way, this is set to true. That will be for the false if in our else condition. So this else condition is we are just handling if the user unchecked the select all checkbox, wherein we are going to uncheck them all. So in this case, this is meant for the else. Sorry, this is supposed to be true because we are checking them all, and this is for the false for the if the user unchecked the select all checkbox, and this will be false, which means that there's no point to enabling the extract button if there's nothing selected. So in this case, we are enabling the button control, because there are some selected drawings. So that's just about it. Let us save our code first. Alright, so now we have handled the select all, we have handled the browse, we have handled the form load. Let's go back into our designer, and now let's handle the cancel. So all this does is just close the form or unload the form. So BlockExtractor form that active form that close, and that's it. Okay, so we also need to handle this event here. If the user check some of the drawings, then we will handle that as well. So double click on this list box, and now we have here the selected index changed. So we will make this as a kind of a logical Boolean result for the btn extract button. So basically setting the enabled property to the condition if there is selected drawing. So we can do that in VB. So if chk lstdwgs that checked items that count is greater than 0, then set it to true. Otherwise, set it to false. This is just basically a shortcut of if condition in one line. Sometimes it's good to have this type of coding, but if you find this confusing, all you have to do is if, let's say, chk that count, this is your condition here, then btn extract blocks that enabled equals true. Otherwise, else btn extract blocks that enabled equals false. So this just a shortcut. And now we are just provide the user with info that text equals number of selected drawings equals chk lstdwgs that checked items dot count. And that's it for our CHK LST selected index change. And now go to the designer. The last event that we're going to handle is the actual extraction. Excuse me. So double click on this button. So we have now here the click event. All right, so all we have to do now is do a quick validation of the block. So if txt block name dot text equals empty or nothing, then lbl info dot text equals please enter the block name to extract, and lbl info dot for color equals color dot red, and we will set the focus to txt block name focus, and then return, which means that there is no point continuing the code because there's no block name specified by the user. All right, so this is just a quick and dirty validation. Next, if let's say there is a valid block name entered, then we are going to go through with the process, and let us declare one integer as integer, dim I as integer, and initialize it to 1, and the total count variable also an integer, and that will be the chk lstdwgs that checked items that count, and then dim block name as string, which is equal to txt block name dot text dot trim. And now we are going to call the actual method that will do the extraction for us, and that is the one that we haven't created yet, but let us call that as BEU for BlockExtractor util equals new BlockExtractor util. So there is no IntelliSense here because we haven't created that particular class. Dim BEU as okay, we will create this in the next video. So let's just comment out that, and then we will loop through the check lstdwg list box to process one drawing at a time. So we will do the for each dwg file, that is our variable name, as a string in chk lstdwgs that checked items. We will provide the user with the information that text equals processing I to string and of and total count. Oops, wrong. Total count that to string, and we put here, and we will also concatenate the file name. Info dot color equals color dot green. All is good. Now we are going to create a file name as a string. So now this is the file name that we're going to pass into the method that we are going to create later on. This will be the file name that will store all the extracted information or all the extracted attributes. So let's just call that as dwg file and concatenate it with the underscore blocks.txt or CSV, up to you. Okay, and then we will again, this BEU here, we will call it BEU dot, we will call the method name as process block extraction, and we will pass the drawing file, the block name to be extracted, and the file name that will be storing all the extracted attributes. And then we will increment the integer, the counter, and that's it. And now we are just going to message the user with the extraction of blocks completed successfully. Alright, so that will be our code, but this is to be created still, our utility class. We will uncomment this later on once we create this particular class. Okay, so that's it for coding the user interface. In the next video, we're going to code the block extraction utility class. I'll see you there.